Someday your pain will be useful. You can turn your pain into like a strength. You are learning things through it even if you don't realise it at the time. Hello, welcome. I'm Julia, and in this video we're going to talk about how to turn your greatest struggle into your greatest strength. I'm happy I'm making this video to document these flowers. I'm very happy with them. My mum got me them. Okay, if you're going through something right now and you don't understand how you're going to get through it or what you can possibly learn from this difficult situation, if you're going through that, I really hope that this video can bring you some comfort. You might even be able to use some of the pain you're feeling now and turn that into a strength later on. I would say my biggest struggle, or certainly one of my biggest struggles that I've gone through, is that I'm in recovery from addiction. That was really hard to deal with at the beginning for all sorts of reasons, all of the reasons you can imagine. I wasn't really aware of how much I had taken from this experience. Like, I knew as I was in recovery, I went to rehab, which I'm very grateful for, and as I was there, I knew that I was learning a lot. It was very overwhelming. I knew that I was picking things up that were going to help me, learning how to be myself again in a sober, safe, sober space. I knew that I would take a lot from that experience and that it would help me, but I just wasn't really sure how. One thing that I repeated, not necessarily when I was in there, although I do have a memory of it. I don't know if it's one of those things where I've associated a phrase with the memory afterwards, or if this happened in the moment. I can picture a particular day, how I was feeling. In my memory, I'm remembering that I was in this moment. I said to myself, someday this pain will be useful. And I certainly was saying that to myself when I came out of rehab as well, but I do remember one time, because it was emotionally really like one of the toughest experiences I've been through. I didn't know how the pain that I was feeling would be useful. I had hope that someday it would, and someday I would be able to have some more perspective and be able to look back on this dark, terrible time, gain something from that experience, some insight. This was brought home to me when, probably around this time last summer, I was having coffee with a friend. She was going through a lot and we were just catching up. I'd seen her before, so I'd already told her all about rehab and about the experience, and she'd been really supportive beforehand. One of the few people who had a little bit of a glimpse of how bad it was, because a lot of my friends, when I told them, they were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you were struggling that much. I was like, yeah. This was another coffee date we had, just catching up. And she was telling me about all of the things that she had gone through in the past few weeks, which had all sort of happened simultaneously after we'd had our last catch-up. It was really overwhelming stuff that she was dealing with. Things to do with her home, her family, just a lot up in the air all of a sudden. And it was particularly hard because she had thought that everything was okay. So she had prayed about things, thought that she was on the right track and she was taking the right action. She thought that everything was working out in the way that it was supposed to, and then all of a sudden everything changed. It's not my story to tell. And so I was listening to her share all of this, and I'm sympathizing, I'm saying, oh my gosh, you know, really with her in this conversation and in this stuff that she's sharing. In my head I'm thinking, can I do anything to help? How will this be resolved? Surely there's some greater plan, or that there'll be something, there's a reason for all of this happening. As I'm listening to it and absorbing what she's saying, she suddenly stops and she's like, what do I do? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, well, you've been through a lot recently. Like, what is your advice here? And I was really taken aback because I was like, oh no, I don't think I'm able to speak into your situation because it's so different from anything that I've experienced. But I did have something that instantly came to mind, and so I told her that. Basically what I was telling her was that sometimes we are too close to the situation, and if you're able to zoom out in that moment, even though you're in it, if you're able to step back and maybe try and have a perspective of a year later, you can look at it and be like, yeah, this is awful, but it will be resolved. I like to think as well about how if something you've planned and you think it's the right thing to do, you've reflected on it, you've journaled about it if you like doing that, this is a decision you've made and you're really happy with this decision, you think you've come to the right thing, and then for whatever reason that gets turned on its head and all of a sudden you can't do that thing anymore. I like to think it's because there's something better that you're supposed to be doing, or something different, and if you would go down that path, you would be on the wrong path and it would be like a detour. I don't know if this is actually true, but I think to me it helps to make sense of things and to give things meaning. If I go through my life like that thinking that there's a reason. I'm dwelling on this anecdote because I didn't realise that my pain would be useful to her. I had previously shared all of the things that I'd gone through, and then she was looking to me for guidance because she was like, you've been through all of this, I'm in a similar, like, emotionally all over the place situation, how do you get through it? We were then talking about that. In the moment, you can't see how this particular episode, this circumstance, this event, you can't see how it fits in the context of your life, and it's only with time that you will get more of that perspective and you will be able to look back and think, oh, in that moment I was learning this, or I reached out to this person and that sparked this and this, and there'll be a whole like chain reaction that in the moment you don't see because you're just dealing with every day how you're feeling and being like, how am I going to get through this? But each little step that you take, when you look back on it in a year or a couple years, you'll be like, oh, that led me to this person, or doing that gave me then the confidence to try this thing. Asking for help that one time meant that when I was really struggling another time, I didn't have any hesitation in picking up the phone and calling someone because I'd done this, and so it was all building on each other even though I didn't realise it at the time. So you can look back and be like, oh, what did I learn from this situation? So someday your pain will be useful. You can turn your pain into like a strength because you are learning things through it, even if you don't realise it at the time. I would say if you're in a bad situation now, especially if it's a very emotionally bad place, depending how bad it is, I think you should definitely speak to a professional. I'm just talking about if you want to do some work yourself. But there are definitely times where you need, I mean, I was in a facility, like I definitely needed some treatment. The best thing you can do in this situation is to feel everything. Do not run away from your feelings. Don't try and numb what you're feeling. Don't try and drown your feelings out. I know this may sound hypocritical because I'm an alcoholic, so I definitely did all of this, but the reason that I'm telling you just try and feel everything is because that is how, in the end, I got sober and have stayed sober so far. There is no shortcut to this. It's really painful. It's horrible. I drank for all sorts of reasons, but one of them was to escape from the way I was feeling, or to at least make any feeling that I felt artificial. So even if I was really upset, I could just say to myself, the reason I'm upset is because I've been drinking. It allowed me to separate myself completely from my emotions. While I loved that about it, it also nearly killed me. Part of healing then was being like, okay, we have to feel all of this. It's gonna suck, but I've got to feel everything. It's like that quote, the only way out is through. Right? If you're in like the eye of the storm, you're not going to have all of the perspective, but you're in the storm and you can't just wish the storm away. Maybe that's the wrong metaphor, but it's just gonna, if you try and drown things out, numb it out, use distractions, use drugs, use anything to run away from your feelings, it is just gonna come back in a different way. So however hard it is now in this moment to feel everything you're feeling, I think that's what you need to lean into. Because if you don't deal with what you're feeling, you're just kicking the can down the road. It's still gonna be there, whatever it is that you're trying to run away from, it's still gonna be there. It's just gonna be waiting for you further down the road. I guess sometimes that needs to happen. Like, alcohol did play a role in my life in terms of helping me deal with things that I think otherwise would have been too much. But it also, I mean, caused all sorts of problems. So the only way out is through. Like, do you think sitting in rehab, crying, detoxing, feeling just like all of it, all of a sudden, do you think I wanted to feel any of that? Do you think I wanted to do that? To sit at the table with everyone else with our little worksheets and work through all of these past experiences, or go through all of these difficult questions? Do you think I wanted to trudge into that cabin every morning and at 9 AM sit around and do our meditation that I hated every second of? Oh my gosh. Do you think I wanted to like share the most personal things I've literally never told anyone before with a group of ostensibly strangers at the beginning, although I'm now friends with them, but even so, there were people there who I wasn't as friendly with, and it's just like, oh yes, I'm about to share all of this stuff with you, okay fine. Like, to sit in tears with all of the feelings and just feel them and not be able to block it out, like, this is really difficult. This is how you use your pain to your advantage. You have to feel it first. You have to acknowledge it. You have to stare at it and be like, I see you. It's so horrible, but I'm not saying it without knowing what it's like. I hope I'm emphasizing that enough. Like, I know how horrible this feels, but I also know that the only way you're going to get through it and be able to use whatever you're feeling in the future is if you actually feel it now and try and deal with it, or just sit with it. So it's very painful, but I think it's necessary to just sit with your feelings. How do you do this? I am very lucky that I had like a safe space where I was sort of forced into dealing with this. There were so many times where I went downstairs into the office and I was like, you know, if I was out there right now, I'd be drinking, and they're like, yes, good, that's why you're here. Like, we're gonna talk about this now. And I was like, I hate you so much. So I had like a safe space where there was no other option. I was sitting with myself and with my feelings every day, and that was really, really horrible. but the things you can do to help you feel better. Walking is such a helpful thing for me, and this was something I couldn't do when I was in treatment. We went on one walk a day, but it was like a 15 or 20-minute walk, sometimes a bit longer, because I would be like, please, can we do another lap of the lake? And they'd be like, fine. I didn't realise how much walking meant to me until I was stuck in this place and I couldn't go for a walk and I couldn't leave. And we always had to be supervised, obviously. And they would all be like, I'd want to go out in the rain and all of this. And they would be like, oh, why? And I'm like, this is the only time that I can leave this place is to go on this walk every day. You get to go home, like to the staff, I'd be like, you get to go home and go to the supermarket or just walk around your neighbourhood. You get to go home and see your family. You get to do whatever you want when you're not here. I am here all the time. Please, can we just go on this 20-minute walk? So if you are able to go for a walk every day, whenever you feel like it, I would say take advantage of that, because that for me has been such a healing thing. I go for a walk every morning. I try and do walking throughout the day, even if it's just around the garden. I feel very lucky that we have a garden. Just the act of like the movement of it, but it's also like really reflective. It's just a great time to mull things over, particularly if you can go to like a green space where there's trees, maybe sit down or just like try and appreciate your surroundings. It's a really reflective environment and it's very calming. So then when you have so much going on emotionally, it's very grounding to go for a walk or just sit outside somewhere green and be like, oh, okay, like I can deal with all of this. It's sort of like the stability of nature. Like you look at these trees and it's like, this is however many decades old and it's still here and it will be here, and I'm dealing with all of these volatile emotions, but I don't have to get sucked into them. I can just sort of observe them the same way that like the wind goes through the trees and it doesn't bother the tree. The thoughts can just be like going by and I don't have to be engaging with every single one, which is kind of more like mindfulness, just noticing what's going on in your head and trying to piece it together. I think journaling is also something that's really helped me. I've done a few journaling videos, so I will link one of them up here and I will also link some of them in the description if you want to check some of them out. Journaling is really helpful because it helps me put all of my words into one narrative, one monologue, I guess. It's just making sense because there'll be so many things going on and I want to write about it. Yeah, it'll be all over the place. I'll be like, oh, and this, but at least it has to be sort of coherent. So that can help like structure things, but also I think it can help you spot patterns. If you write something, say you're going to write every day for a week, you're going through something difficult, you're like, I'm going to write about this for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you want every day. And then you can come back to it after a couple of weeks, leave it and come back to it. And you then be able to look through, if you read back through it, you can find like patterns or see things that you wouldn't normally notice in your just internal monologue. You might suddenly read back and it will be very obvious that you have this belief that nobody cares, or you have this insecurity, you don't think that it's possible for you to get better, or you think it's going to last forever, this horrible thing, this horrible situation, or you feel really powerless. It might give you a different perspective having written about it. Journaling, I think, is so helpful in dealing with all of these things and turning your pain into something not productive, I don't want to say that word, but turning that into a strength. It's also just a really helpful practice, I find. So journaling, writing, very important. I think another thing, a really helpful exercise I have been using recently, just because I've been going through some stuff, not anything big, lots of different conflicting emotions, and I've been imagining my emotions as like waves and I'm in the water, and instead of being like buffeted by the waves and being like, oh my gosh, I can't swim, everything is overwhelming me, I can't touch the bottom, like I feel like I'm gonna go under. Instead, just allowing myself to drift in this water and just being like, okay, there's all of this going on, like there's a lot happening, but I don't have to fight this. I can just sort of notice it and just let it be. When you stop fighting or struggling with yourself in that way, there is a kind of peace to just observing the chaos and being like, wow, look at all of these things that are happening at the same time. Like I'm worried about this thing, this completely unrelated thing, this person, this stuff I need to do, whatever it is, all of this stuff going on, but I just can just drift with it and not be like, oh my gosh, like frantically getting so caught up in it. I think it's kind of similar to how when you have like a physical pain and you don't know what it is, it will, I find, we just talk from my experience and hopefully you can relate. But if I have like a pain in my side and I don't know what it is, that is going to worry me so much more than if I've got a pain in my side and I'm like, oh yeah, that's ovulation pain. It's still painful, but I have a different relationship to the pain because I know why it's there, so I don't have to worry about it. I'm not thinking, what is that? I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is. It hurts, but we can just get on with this. And I think that's similar to like the water drifting with your thoughts thing. You're not attaching yourself to the worry or to the why am I feeling like this is awful. So it's changing your relationship with your pain, changing your relationship with the way that you're feeling. I know it's not a perfect comparison because, at least for me, physical pain is so much easier to deal with than emotional pain. If I know why I have pain, even if it's really bad physical pain, that seems easier to deal with than emotional pain, just because there's no physical manifestation of it. It's all going on in your head. And yeah, I guess crying would be a physical manifestation. And I know pain, emotional pain or unresolved pain can manifest in your body in different ways, but I'm just talking about in the moment. Like, yes, you could cry, but otherwise it just feels like so much. You might be just like, how do I make this go away? And unfortunately, the way you get it to go away is by feeling it and processing it. What's that saying about life happens at the edge of your comfort zone, or life begins at the edge of your comfort zone? It's going to be really hard to process and deal with whatever it is that you're struggling with at the moment and try and make something out of that. It's probably going to be even hard to believe that you will be able to use whatever you're feeling. I have certainly found that it's been the experiences I've had which are really painful that they have been useful in unexpected ways, either to me or, as we said, as we began with my friend, useful to the people around you. I want the caveat to be, though, that I don't think you have to go through horrible things in order to learn these life lessons. Like, I'm not saying, oh, it's so great that you're hurting right now because you'll learn something from this. Like, that is kind of what I'm saying, but I'm not saying that it's a good thing to be in pain. And I don't think you have to suffer in order to learn. I think that when you're through the storm, through whatever it is you're going through now, hopefully you'll be able to look back and be like, oh, I learnt this, or that was teaching me something, even if at the time I didn't know what it was. Even if it's nothing for you, you might get a few years away from it and then suddenly your friend is going through the same thing, or someone you know, like a family member, and you can be like, I can help this person. I can be there for them in a way that other people can't, because I know what they're going through and I know exactly how to help them with this. I had an experience where in sixth form I was going through something and people didn't really know how to react, so it was all a bit awkward. But I think they were like, we're here for you. But there was one girl who had been through something very similar. I remember exactly where we were, and she just stopped me in the corridor. And she was a friend of mine at the time, but I can't remember exactly what she said, because that would be ideal. There's that quote, people will forget what you said or did, but never how you made them feel. And she said, she shared her experience, which I had heard some of, but not in as much detail. And she was like, I bet you're feeling like this, and I bet you're feeling like this. Know that this is normal, and know that people don't mean this, even if it sounds like they do. She said all of this. It wasn't like a long conversation. Like I say, she stopped me in the corridor, so maybe we were chatting for only a few minutes. But as she was speaking, and I think even at the time I was like, yes, everything that she's just said, I was like, oh my gosh, someone else has been through it, someone gets it, and someone is actually relating to me in a way that makes me feel seen, as opposed to feeling like I'm sort of intruding, or that I'm being really awkward by being like, I'm really struggling right now. Maybe whatever you're going through right now, you'll be able to use that to help other people. But again, that's not to say that it's great that you're going through it. We can find meaning in these things, and you can learn from this really difficult circumstance. And I have certainly found that mantra of someday this pain will be useful. I've certainly found that not only helpful in the moment, to repeat that to myself and to remind myself of when I'm really going through something, but also it has been true in my lived experience. I hope this video has given you some comfort, maybe helped you feel like you're not alone, or some hope, hopefully. And I will leave my video, Stop Choosing a Bad Life for Yourself, on the screen, because in that video I talk about how you can gradually learn to let go of the bad things that have happened to you and move forward. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe. God bless, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.